We'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome, my name is Kyle Hamada. I'm the Communications Director for Friends of the Inyo. And welcome to the third and final presentation of the 2021 Owens Lake Bird Festival presented by Friends of the Inyo. Just as a reminder, you've all been put on mute as you entered the meeting room, and that's just so that you can hear Mike when he's presenting. But please share your thoughts with us. You're welcome to type away in the chat box. We've already got lots of questions in already, but you can ask any questions that you might have in the chat box, and I'll be sure to record those so that we can answer them during the Q&A. And like I said, in the past two presentations, we missed gathering with everyone in person as a community, but we're still that community, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. And the opportunity to go virtual allows us to have different events that we've never had before. So we hope that you've enjoyed the event so far and that you'll enjoy this last one here with Mike Prather. And as a final reminder, we will be recording this presentation. So if you have to leave early, or if you can't, or if there are those folks who haven't been able to make it, we will be sharing out the links to the recorded presentations in a follow-up email next week. Just a quick run of show. I'm going to finish up this introduction, and then I'm going to introduce Mike, and he's going to go ahead and give the presentation. And then after that, we're going to take a very quick break, maybe 5 minutes. You can get a snack or a drink of water if you need to. And then I'll tell you just a little bit about Friends of the Inyo and the work that we do. And then we'll go ahead and get into the question and the Q&A, where we can ask your questions and Mike will give us the answers. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and close off the event. Now, before we get started, I just want to take a moment and again acknowledge that these places that we're talking about here, we call them Owens Valley, but they have been since time immemorial and still very much are inhabited by the Paiute and Shoshone and Timbisha peoples. Many of these lands are now known by names recognizing people who've never set foot here, but these lands are called Payahunadu and Panawe by the Numu and Nu peoples, respectively. So in taking time for a land acknowledgement, we recognize the original inhabitants of the Eastern Sierra, and we show respect for the native peoples and surface the often suppressed colonial history of our country. With that being said, again, for those of you who have been to the Eastern Sierra, I hope that you found it to be an incredible place. And for those of you who haven't visited, we hope that you are able to do so very soon. And we will be continuing the Owens Lake Bird Festival in person, as many of you have come to know it, in the future when it's safe to do so. But again, we're very excited to have a virtual event this year. So thank you for joining us. And without further ado, we'll get started with today's presentation, Owens Lake's importance in Western Hemisphere bird migration. And tonight's presenter is Mike Prather, longtime Lone Pine resident and educator, an expert birder, a former board member for Friends of the Inyo, and a passionate advocate for wild places and wild things. So Mike, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Kyle, for that nice introduction. I wanted to also thank Martin for his great presentation, taking us through all the beauty of nature. Just the glory of birds, just the awe of birds. And when you can stop them like Martin does, to where you can go up and see thin feather components or a drop of water on the back of a duck, it's just amazing. Thanks so much for that. It was good. And I enjoyed our time out on Owens Lake yesterday, Martin. We had 15 species of shorebirds. Is what I came up with, 15 species. Okay, well, I'm going to begin my program. The thread or kind of theme of this is the importance of Owens Lake in the Western Hemisphere, but it's also its importance regionally and locally. So we don't want to lose track of that, but we don't want to forget that this is a place that has international importance. It was a lake that came and went many times over geologic time. depending on glacial periods and dry times between, the lake would get as deep as 300 feet and overflow down into China Lake and Cyril's Lake and Panamint Valley and over into Death Valley. Mono Lake water would spill and come down all the way through the Owens Valley. And then at times it wouldn't spill at all, like at the time of when settlers came. It was a terminal lake, and when that occurred, and in that water, when it came, it stayed. All the minerals it carried, dissolved volcanoes and mountains and everything stayed after the water went away and formed clouds like the ones you see in this picture. This photograph was by Forbes. He was a photographer in the Owens Valley, lived in Bishop up until about 1913 or 14. He took several photographs of Owens Lake, and some exist on eBay as postcards. I'm lucky enough to have nabbed a couple of them, but they're fairly dear because it's a special place and there aren't that many of them. He also took some beautiful photos of the indigenous people here in the valley. This is looking across Owens Lake from the western shore. That body of land, that kind of flat volcanic tableland over there, is what's called Malpine Mesa. It's a wilderness area now. And then that low spot to the right is where the road would go over to Darwin and Panamint Valley and Death Valley. Okay. I'm worried about a delay, Kyle.
Oh, sure.
I wonder if I need to click. Oh, there it goes. Okay. When Kyle and I were practicing this program a while back, I had a delay when I pressed the button and expect the slide to jump and change. Sometimes we had to wait 6 or 8 seconds. So please bear with us. This is a graphic that shows the Western Hemisphere. You recognize North and South America and Central America. There's some initials. People can see my cursor, I believe. There's some initials up here. We tend to pronounce this acronym WISRN. It's the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network. It is an international network of just of the most special and precious areas in North, Central, and South America for birds, particularly migrating and nesting shorebirds. So those dots show a few of the major ones. There's a few more than 100 sites. Owens Lake joined in, I think, 2017 or 2018. And it joined other places like San Francisco Bay, the Sacramento wetlands, the valley up there, Mono Lake, and places, just tremendous places like that. So it goes from Tierra del Fuego, the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve Network, goes from Tierra del Fuego all the way up to the north, the most northern parts of Canada and Alaska. There we go. This is a picture of a picture. This was in 2019, and it was a workshop for a work group. It was held up at Mono Lake over a couple of days. It was an international group of us that got together to work on phalaropes, particularly Wilson's phalarope. Wilson's phalarope is a bird that has an incredible migration. It nests up in the Western United States, up into Southern Canada. It doesn't go up far into the far north at all, like the redneck phalarope. And then in the fall, they begin to stage or group in mass at places like Great Salt Lake, Utah, Mono Lake. They, to a lesser extent, we see them at Owens Lake when they pass through. But this is a photograph of Wilson's phalaropes in our winter, um, feeding with Chilean flamingos. This is in the high Andes. They also drop down into these salt lakes, very much like our lake. They drop down into these salt lakes like Mar Chiquita in Argentina. And in fact, maybe 200,000 or more Wilson's phalaropes end up in there. And these are the times we try to count them. We try to count them at Mono Lake. We try to count them at Great Salt Lake. We try to count them at San Francisco Bay, and then anywhere in between. But the thing is with Wilson's phalaropes, they begin eating at these salt lakes, these saline lakes, and will literally double their body weight. They will become so heavy that researchers that want to study them or band them can with a boat can just catch them with a butterfly net paddling along, because they can't even fly off of the water. They're that heavy. They're so filled with fat. All of their organs are have reduced in size, and they will, even their digestive system, they will simply just live off of that fat and fly nonstop from Mono Lake and Great Salt Lake to the Altiplano, the high Andes. And from there, fatten up some more and then drop down into Argentina. And then they'll come back. It's just amazing. They fly nonstop, which shorebirds are the super marathoners of migrants. Anyhow, so these are some of the birds that may have come through Owens Lake out there with flamingos. It's kind of nice to see. So whose phalaropes are they? Are they ours up here or theirs down there? I think they're ours for the hemisphere. These are some of the migratory pathways in the Western Hemisphere. The different colors represent different kinds of birds. Some of them are shorebirds, some are waterfowl, some are raptors and things. But you can see that these birds migrate, some mostly along land, and then some will actually cross water to cut corners. Some will take off from Mexico and go all the way down to Chile. Some will nest over in Alaska, and then in fall is is July. That's when we start expecting to see some of these beginning. They will come all the way across Canada into the Newfoundland area, the Northeast, and then cut the corner all the way down into South America. Others will go up and down through the West Indies, and then some will only follow land. Raptors in particular do not like to kind of go across water. They will go around the edge of water. Some birds will take off from the Yucatan Peninsula right here in Mexico and go across. I mean, a ruby-throated hummingbird will do that. That thing weighs as much as 2 paper clips or something, and it'll do that. But you get a vulture or you get a Mississippi kite, and they will go around and then in. So it's fascinating, fascinating. With shorebirds, they're very specific about the kind of places that they like to land. And these are critically necessary habitats, types of habitats, because these are, David Gaines and the Mono Lake Committee years ago said, these are the refueling stations. These lakes here, they have an abundant amount of food like brine flies and such. It's a very simple food web. It's not a complicated system, but there's tremendous abundance. And so the birds will hit the ground. They will immediately start eating. They will just eat and eat and eat. They might stay at three or four days at one of these places and then fly on to the next one. Some of the birds will go 300 or 400 miles at a time. Some will go several thousand miles at a time. They need these places. We know that Owens Lake went away when the city of Los Angeles diverted all the snow runoff and the Owens River itself back in 1913, Owens Lake slowly began to disappear by the mid 20s. And thank goodness for accidents. In a modern age, we have things like Clean Air Acts and Endangered Species Acts, but particularly the Clean Air Act. We also have laws that could have been used in the old days, but the old days were different. A law we use now is called the Public Trust Law. It goes back to English common law. It might even have some ties to the Romans. That law called for, the Clean Air Act in the United States and California called for the fixing of the regional dust health hazard at Owens Lake, the largest dust source in the United States. And it stuck. It would not be thwarted. Well, one of the tools to fix the dust at Owens Lake, and your 5-year-old kindergartner would tell you what would work, and that'd be water. Right? They play in the mud. They play with the garden hose and sprinkler. They know how to make things wet. That's a painful blow for the city of Los Angeles, but it's where the water had always gone in the past. So water was quick. Water really worked. There are more methods out there now, some that use no water at all. But through just kind of a secondary benefit of fixing the dust, we brought back a heritage wildlife resource that was lost years ago. In a time when our news is mostly bad on the environmental side, we had good news at Owens Lake. Years ago, we had good news at Mono Lake. We have water back in the Owens River Gorge. That was an accident also. And we have a water agreement with Inyo County in Los Angeles. So there has been good news here in the Eastern Sierra and Inyo Mono. We need to spread that and make sure the rest of the world gets that too. What we're looking at now is Owens Lake, 15 miles north and south, about 10 miles east to west. This middle area, can people see my cursor okay? All right, people are nodding, yes. This is called the brine pool. This area tends to not be emissive. It's often damp, and it often has more of a hardened salt. There's multiple kinds of salts out here. It has more of a hardened salt, one that doesn't effloresce or wick up through the sand and the mud. So this tends to be a hardened surface. The dust is like this backwards crescent from the north over to the east and down to the south. So every one of these polygons you see through here, that's the Los Angeles Dust Control Project at Owens Lake. Right now, about 45 square miles of different kinds of treatments. Most of them involve water, and using about 65,000 acre feet of water per year. This is the delta of the Owens River, where it comes into Owens Lake. Lone Pine would be kind of up 395 here. Little Keeler, you can see its name here, and then way down here, the metropolitan area of Cartago and Olancha along 395. So this is the place we're talking about. And so many of you have driven so many times up and down that corridor, that 395 corridor, just through some of the most beautiful country in the world. Okay. Well, if we had a fixed wing aircraft, this is kind of what we would see. We're looking over at Olancha Peak. We're looking probably at the eastern or northeastern corner of the lake. And you can't really see Keeler. Keeler's out of the picture here, but all of this is part of the dust project. Out here is that brine pool area. It's non-emissive for dust. But here you can see several of the different dust control methods, some of which have been tremendous benefit for birds. These polygons in here are water. These are ponds. The lake is not flat. In 1872, when that earthquake in Lone Pine was, the lake dropped on the shore at the base of the Sierra, and water actually slowly moved that direction. And a little mini tsunami came all the way back up into a place called Swansea, about 12 inches deep worth of water. but it did happen. So the lake tends to have the water flow towards the Sierra. So it goes downhill, and if it hits a road, it backs up into a pond. Tailwater, farmers would call it, ranchers. These light tan areas are gravel. They use no water. These other areas in here are alkali meadow, where there had been alkali meadows that some of the birds used along the lake historically. Some of those have been recreated. There's also some islands that have been put in, and lots of water. So it's a wondrous place. Owens Lake. I'm looking at this, Kyle, and my window of thumbnails is covering some of the text. People aren't seeing that, are they, or are they?
No, there's, we don't see the text. Was that your question?
Is some of the text blocked here in my slide on the right where the thumbnail, the videos of each person, the visitors are?
No, I don't think that we're seeing that.
Okay, it is in mine. So, okay. I'll bring it back to Kyle. These are some photos I took over the years. On the left over here, upper left, are western sandpipers. These birds go south along the Atlantic coast, the Gulf Coast, down into Mexico and Central America. Over in here, we have a dunlin. These nest up where polar bears are and go farther south, but not super far south. And all the rest of the little ones around the dunlin are western sandpipers. Dunlins have these black bellies, and they have, here's a dunlin next to a western sandpiper. You can see their bill length difference right there. They're a good sized bird. Whoops, that's interesting. I can't go backwards, Kyle?
Can you click on the screen?
Oh, wake it up again. Hey, I'm talking about you. Okay.
There you go.
Well, had to tell it what we're talking about. Wake up. Shorebirds are among the groups of birds showing the most dramatic declines. Some of these birds are still existing in millions. Their world population or their hemispheric population is still in the millions or hundreds of thousands, but there's been a decline. There's been a decline on their breeding success in the north. There's been a decline in some of the habitats that are available during their migration, places where areas have been drained for agriculture, places where they've been filled in for airports or landfills. And in some places, some shorebirds are still hunted, like we used to do here in the United States. Down in the West Indies, there's places where they still hunt curlews and wimbles and things. So the idea is to get out ahead of it, not wait till you get down to like condors, where you get down to literally a handful of condors, and you have to go out and trap them out of the wild and start a breeding program and reintroduce them, which is incredibly expensive, but wonderful to happen. We don't want the birds, we don't want any of the wildlife to get to that stage. So we want to get out in front of it, protect habitats when we can, try not to have them destroyed or dried. But we can't, it's harder when we're dealing with climate. Some of the places up in the far north where permafrost is melting has been dramatically warmer, just like the climate model showed. They showed that the most rapid and the greatest increase in warmth and climate change would be in the far north. That's exactly what's happened. Permafrost is melting. Some of those areas are draining. It's no longer frozen ground some of the year, and shrubs and trees are expanding into tundra areas. Well, some of those tundra areas are where birds nest. The timing of when the food hatches in relation to the birds nesting and needing the food to feed young and themselves, some of that timing is off. This is also happening with butterflies. They get there where the flowers used to be. It was the right time, and they haven't flowered yet, or maybe they've already flowered and they're past. So climate is a great risk. Okay, wake up. Yeah, I probably jumped about 3 slides there. Yep, there we go. Sorry about that. Um, the most important food source for many of these birds at these stopping places, especially these saline lakes, are these brine or alkali flies. I'm holding the pupae cases, the pupal stage of the flies, um, in my hand. Sometimes these drifts are inches thick, covering the edges of these brackish and salty ponds. The birds really eat this. There's less food value in brine shrimp, like at Mono Lake and Great Salt Lake. There's lots of brine shrimp, but they do not provide the kind of nutrition, these dense energy packets of oils and proteins and things that the birds need. Um, so anyhow, this gives you a little bit of an example, but you can see places where they're just drifts of these. The native peoples, indigenous peoples here would collect these in winnowing baskets, the shallow baskets, at Mono Lake and Owens Lake, dry them for the winter, and also trade some with groups over on the west side of the Sierra, along with pine nuts and salt and things like that, rabbit skin blankets. Well, geez, Kyle, I have to tell it to wake up. They jumped 2 again. Yeah, it did. Okay. These are regurgitation pellets from California gulls. California gulls need lots of food too. They're a larger bird, but they can't really the material of these cocoons and exoskeletons, and so they regurgitate. And so you find these marbles on some of the roads. You'll come into an area where there'll just be all these little black marbles all over the ground, and that's where the gulls have been roosting for a while, and while they're roosting, they'll occasionally just chuck a pellet. They try to act like nothing happened, I'm sure, socially. When the lake was freshwater, which it was off and on over time, it's an old place. It had bivalves, mollusks. It had these mussels. These are about 3 inches long, 4 inches long, and it had kinds of snails. And I'm sure that these were part of the food for some of the migrating birds. In the saltier lake, like it is now, the state it's in now, these can't exist. But there are layers around the lake if you know where to look, and you can find these. Just a nice historical record. These are 12 to 14,000 years old.
Sorry, Mike, it looks like there's that delay.
Yeah, I guess that it is. I'm going to have to just, okay. With shorebirds' reliance on coastal wetlands, Arctic tundra, and saline lakes in the region, highly specified food resources along migration, they're extremely vulnerable to changes. And it's just what we were talking about just moments ago, mismatched timing of migration and food resources. This is a photograph I took at Owens Lake about 10 years ago. It's a cloud of what we call peeps. Peeps are the small sandpipers, the little ones, least sandpipers, western sandpipers, and so on. It's a pretty good group right there. That's the Inyo Mountains over towards the Cerro Gordo side of the lake. And that was a good day. Those are the days when you get goosebumps because you just feel the life of the planet. It's just it's a biological event, and have been lucky enough to be there at that moment. Unforgettable. I'm going to work on the delay right now, Kyle. Going to let it go a few seconds before I start clicking. Huh. Yeah, all right. Looks like about 8 seconds. One of the birds that comes through, Martin and I saw 4 of these yesterday, are semi-palmated plovers. They breed in this rusty area up here. They migrate through these gold areas and these blue areas along the edges and these shores, all the way down to northern South America, along the northwestern coast of South America, all the way around Brazil and down into Argentina. Yeah. Some of them will go that far, but they nest way far to the north. They depend on places like Owens Lake and places along the coast. A bird that doesn't travel as far as the long-billed curlew. They go down. They migrate south into mostly Mexico, grasslands and things down there. A little bit on the coast of Central America. You'll see them on the beach. Those of you that are Elaine probably sees them down there at Encinitas and Solano and all that, or Solana Beach in the wintertime. And then they will come up into these rufous areas, grasslands, which are vulnerable to conversion to agriculture, drainage, and climate, fire, and they'll come into those areas, and that's where they'll nest. We've had over 100 in a day at Owens Lake. We think there's less than 200,000 of these total for this species. And there tends to be a decline in numbers we're concerned about. We don't think migration is the worry. We don't think wintering areas are the worry. We think mostly it's their nesting areas. That's where the change or the problem has occurred. This is an avocet feeding, like Martin was talking about, with that sweeping action just down in the mud. They have a lot of nerves in their bills. It's tremendously innervated. They can feel so much, and so they can suck in a bunch of muck and they can filter it through screens, kind of like a baleen whale, and then swallow the lot. The mud and the bugs and the water will go out. So lots of food for them. Some will nest at Owens Lake. They nest up into southern Canada, down through the western Great Plains. They winter Mexico, Baja, along our coasts, the East Coast, down to Cuba. It looks like a little bit of Central America. Just one of the premier beautiful shorebirds. We have both of them, I think. I always say at Owens Lake, we have the American avocet and we have the black-necked stilt. Those are two of the largest. The largest is the curlew, of course, but we have these spectacular looking avocets and stilts. One of the birds of real concern is the snowy plover. This was the design by Keith Hansen that we used for t-shirts long ago, it seems like now. You can see where they like to nest. Some breed along the coast from Mexico up into Oregon. Those are coastal populations. They seem to not mix with the interior population. Most of them nest at Great Salt Lake, but some get all the way over into Texas and into, Nebraska and Kansas. Or Nebraska's up there. Oklahoma and Kansas. This bird in North America, their population is probably less than 25,000, maybe less than 20,000. Owens Lake is the largest nesting location in California for this particular species. It was one of the reasons that Owens Lake was selected by WisRun to become part of the Shorebird Reserve Network, because we've had as many as 600 plus adults at Owens Lake. And that's not counting the juveniles. They'll have three eggs. Most shorebirds lay 4, but these little guys lay 3. we weren't not even counting the juveniles, just adults, 600 plus. We seem to always get at least 400 or more. So extremely important place, Owens Lake. We also have very high numbers of the avocets. We've had upwards of 30,000 in a single day. We also have high numbers of the least sandpiper and western. We've had thousands of those. Those were the numbers that kind of fit with the criteria for WSRID. They want special places for where birds nest, where they migrate through, where there might be colonies, like along the coast and things, some nesting birds there. So that's what really won us the recognition here. Okay, wait for the delay. Huh? Yep. Now here's a bird that uses Owens Lake. But this bird, who, when I moved to Lone Pine, everyone that I knew in Lone Pine called them snow geese. All the kids did. I taught elementary school and middle school. And we would literally open the doors when some kid would run in from recess and say, "There's snow geese, there's snow geese." All the classrooms would empty, and we just all go out on the playground and look at these birds. Where I began to try to slowly teach the town of Lone Pine that these are American white pelicans. And they're they're migrating. And they like to migrate by soaring. They like to get in a bubble of air, a kettle of birds, go up 15,000 feet plus, and then take off in a straight line and coast as far as they can. So they can only do that during the day when the sun is providing the heat, the energy for air to rise. Why do they come to Owens Lake? Well, at the end of the day, the heat is slowly being turned off. They start looking for places to come down. They like to eat fish. Well, there's no fish at Owens Lake, but they will come down, and you can see them out there. They'll get out there in the middle in some of these places that are so flat that anything higher than a grasshopper could not sneak up on these guys. So they are using Owens Lake for safety, for rest and safety. The next day it starts to heat up. Off they go and look for a place that has fish where they can have some breakfast. Beautiful photo. I think this was taken by Todd Vogel up in Bishop. He owns East Side Sports up there in Bishop. Longtime Friends of the Inyo member. Okay, these are some of the ways that dust is controlled at Owens Lake. Upper left, I'm with a fellow, Miguel Luna from Los Angeles, and he came up to do some drone work. And so he sent his drone up there, and it's hovering. He's not even on the controls. He just said it, and it took a picture of he and I with all of this tillage. And these are contoured to wind directions, and they're as deep as your waist, at least, the depth of these, the furrows, and then the ridges. These are made in clay soils. You can't do this in sandy soil. You want clay clods to last for several years before you have to redo it again, because they get rained on, they get snowed on, and so on. But it'll break the speed of the wind. If we can break the speed of the wind below 20 miles an hour, the big dust will not lift off or start bouncing across the surface and knocking off other particles that knock off other particles. So this is proven to work, but no water. Probably good for spiders, maybe a lizard or two. The part the birds look for is farther out towards the mountains. We see all these nice wet habitats out here. That's the kind of dust control we like. But the compromise, and to compromise with the city of Los Angeles, and to also work with the state of California, it's very concerned about drought. State Lands Commission owns the lake bed at Owens Lake. DWP needed a lease to build their dust project on state lands. They needed to get a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service of California. So Audubon showed that we were willing to come up with a solution. that we were willing to give up some of the water that was being used out there. In other words, we would work towards trying to sincerely save significant water if the city of Los Angeles would work to protect and enhance habitat for all time on a significant scale. Audubon was not an authorized agency, but state lands and Fish and Wildlife are. So we educated and provided information for Cal Fish and Wildlife, California State Lands Commission, and Audubon's language and concerns went into the lease and went into the permit. And that kind of codified or protected the resource at Owens Lake. There was no litigation and a settlement, but something had to work toward to make this, that it just couldn't be changed willy-nilly in the future. Lower right is using water and bubblers, just like farmers do. Let the water move. This is a quarry, lower left photo. This is a quarry hidden mostly. It's up above the Plover Plaza, just opposite it, just northeast of Keeler. This is where Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is quarrying dolomite, crushing it, hauling out to the lake, and spreading gravel over several square miles now. Very expensive, but it uses no water. 30 to 40 million dollars per square mile, roughly. The lake is now well known as a birding resource, a place to just see biological wonder, the wonders of migration and things. This is a group out looking at birds. You can see some of the specks there. Malpine Mesa Wilderness there in the background. So the resource as for tourism and birders coming up, doing Friends of the Indian doing bird festivals, that has grown and grown to where now it appears in literature from Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Department of Water and Power, as you know from last night's program, are partners on the Bird Festival. They lead some of our tours. They loan us biologists for a weekend, overnight. They'll put them up in a hotel. They bring their trucks. It's just, you wonder, you kind of shake your head sometimes, and this really be happening. But it has. Took a lot of work, and it took years. Okay, I press my button. We'll wait for the countdown here. No questions yet, huh?
We've got questions. I'm saving them here for our
You're
Q&A.
saving, okay. The rest of the world is also learning about Owens Lake. This is not like an impressionist photo by Matisse or Monet or something. This is German television. They came over and they were doing a series on four important rivers in the United States. One of them was the Owens River. And so Owens Lake is a part of that. So I worked with them a couple of days, did some drone work, did some interviews, guided them around trying to find good locations. They loved it. The Germans love extremes. Death Valley, turn off the air conditioner, feel it, the real deal. The pass at Owens Lake has had lots of mining for different minerals, usually salts, like a mineral called trona, which is a common industrial product called soda ash. This is the last large plant that closed down around 1970, Pittsburgh Plate and Glass. You pass it on Highway 395 when you go north and south. I caught it on a nice day. We were trying to decide whether it was going to rain or not. And so we had a little bit of the blue hole above Owens Lake where the sun could come through, but the Inyos were really getting their share of water. Those are the special days. Timing is everything. Martin can tell you that. And sometimes also that luck is sometimes better than being good. Friends of the Inyo started the Bird Festival in 2015, and we had 5, I believe. And we were getting ready for our 6th when the world experienced an unforeseen circumstance. It led to a pandemic of the entire planet. But anyhow, this is the town hall in downtown Lone Pine, where we brought in, 150 plus people, put them on tours that involved birds, habitat, geology, history, movies. It's just an incredible offering. This is a younger daughter, she's older now, of Jorah Fogg, and her daddy, and he's showing her some birds that are way out there. She's learning to use a spotting scope and starting young. That's the way. That's the way you do it. So we build a constituency. These are some of Martin's blackneck stilts. A tuxedo with sunburned legs. This is my granddaughter Kestrel when she was 2. She's now 8, but she was out there. You can see that the wind was blowing a little bit by her hair there, but she was on a few hundred western sandpipers and peeps. She likes it outside. A dawn with a few blackneck stilts. A pretty place looking south. This is the Coso Mountains on the way to China Lake and the Naval Weapons Center. This is also the Coastal Mountains Wilderness Area. This is the South Sierra Wilderness Area. 395 heads south to Fossil Falls and on. But this is a beautiful pond. And I always like, when I see these, I always like to think that this is the way the lake looked. Now there's just small little units of it, but I still enjoy that. It's almost like you're in a boat when you're going along, driving along the berms. Owens Lake is a lake, a salt lake of great importance. And it's inland and at a not a very high elevation. Mono Lake is much higher, over 6,000 feet. So winter is winter up there. Down here, we'll have some shorebirds spend the whole winter here, and that's unusual. So it has added value in that regard. So these are, I call the three amigos, los tres amigos. These people, they were the voice of the birds. In the center is Andrea Jones, who is the director of bird conservation for Audubon, California, the entire state. She came over, stayed at our house. My wife Nancy made pies for her. We just did several years of that. Saved money on her budget from motels and dining. On the right is Pete Pumphrey with Eastern Sierra Audubon, and then I'm on the left. Looks like towards the end of the day. We start getting a little beat up about that time with the wind and the sun. But I think we showed, and if those that helped us, but I think we showed that individuals can really make a difference. Sometimes, not always. At Owens Lake, we had a great outcome, and we did it by partnering with a small rural Audubon chapter with Audubon, California, which has links to National Audubon that won the big public trust case up in Mono County in 1983. And we carried that message to Owens Lake. And somebody's going to speak for these birds. We're going to speak for these birds. Somebody has to protect these birds. And we were just a broken record. One of our old-time Audubon lobbyists in Washington, D.C., Brock Evans, had a sign in his office, that's where I learned this, that said, endless pressure, endlessly applied. And that's what you have to do. Endless pressure, endlessly applied. And that might be the very last one, Kyle. That might be number 28. I don't know. I think it's the last one.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. And before we get to the Q&A, I just want to say a quick word about Friends of the Inyo. And this is the organization that I work for. Again, my name is Kyle Hamada, and I'm the communications director for Friends of the Inyo. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the work that we do. And for those of you who heard in the previous 2 presentations, thank you for bearing with me. But for those of you who may not know about Friends of the Inyo, we're a nonprofit based in Bishop, California. And our mission is to protect and care for the Eastern Sierras public lands. And we do that through a few programs, and that's education, advocacy, and stewardship. And this year, we're continuing our Trail Ambassador program, and we're working hard to combat the challenges of increased concentration of visitors caused by the pandemic. So we're doing this by picking up litter. We're educating folks on the trail and at trailheads of leave no trace principles so that these places that you love remain clean and beautiful. And 100% of the profits from the Owens Lake Bird Festival have always and will continue to go towards funding our programs. And so by attending tonight, you're already supporting us. So thank you so much from all of us at Friends of the Inyo. We're grateful to have you. And if you'd like to make a donation to further support us, you can follow the link that I'm going to include in the chat box very shortly, and you can donate online. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on. And before I forget, I'm going to put this link in the chat box. Right here, there we go. And otherwise, we're gonna get going with the Q&A. Mike, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. You got more questions coming in. I'm gonna do my best not to miss anyone. All right. First question on the queue. Mary asked, "What route do the California gulls take from Owens Lake to get to the Great Salt Lake in Utah?"
The birds that go to Great Salt Lake probably come from south of Utah, down along the Gulf of Mexico, where they might have spent the winter. The ones that come here probably come from the California coast, and they move inland and then up. Some may come over the Sierra. They're from the Bay Area. There was a time where in the South San Francisco Bay, they worked hard to take better care of their landfills, large landfills that were gull attractors, and they had about 20,000 gulls pillaging that place. And they cleaned it up to where there were very few. And around that time, the number started to increase at Mono Lake. And it was thought very likely that it could have occurred because of that. We know that in the summer, if you're backpacking in the Sierra, you see cow gulls up there, especially in the Mono area where they nest. I've seen osprey up there. So I think the Great Salt Lake ones are not ones that come from Owens. They come from a separate southern area. They'll nest all the way some will nest all the way into the Dakotas in the Podbo country, and they might have come from Louisiana or Florida or something.
Great, very interesting. All right, on the topic of birds, we have another question from Mary, and that is the number of yellow-headed blackbirds increasing at Owens Lake?
You know, I think so, because some of the habitat that has been created is what yellow-headed blackbirds like. They like tules, they like cattails and large sedges with a little water underneath it, and that's where they nest. And there is more of that kind of habitat around Owens Lake than there was in the past. So I would say yes, they're increasing.
Oh wow! On that same topic of bird habitat, we have a question from Eric, and his question is, has shorebird habitat improved when compared to pre-diversion days compared to the present time?
Yes, good question. Very much so, just by multiples and multiples and multiples. There's very likely more shorebird habitat and even open water diving bird habitat, deep being 12 inches, than there was historically when Owens Lake had water in it. It only had the shore. There's now all these polygons, some even have islands, and in those polygons are all these muddy edges and weaving serpentine edges, to where there's probably more miles of edges of feeding areas and square miles of habitat, and it far exceeds historical amounts.
Wow. So we actually had an earlier question, which was very similar. And that question is, do we know the extent of disruption that draining the lake had caused on bird migration? But it sounds like, in a way, looking at the entire picture, today, the lake has more habitat than it did prior to the lake draining. Is that true?
That's correct. I think what we hope for, and these are extremely hard scientific questions to find out about and to try to demonstrate or understand. Um, when the lake disappeared after the river and all of the streams were diverted to Los Angeles, um, it dried by about the mid 20s. So for that 80 years or so, um, it's assumed that the birds simply had to fly over Owens Lake and continue north. They could get up into Mono Lake, but Mono Lake, it does, it's colder up there longer. So in the earlier spring, there's not as many bugs like there is now in Owens Lake. So there's a timing issue there. But as far as numbers decreasing, trying to be able to define that, I don't think we're able to yet.
Sure.
You try to count these shorebirds and phalaropes and things where they gather in large numbers. When they nest, they're all dispersed all over the place, all across Canada, Alaska, wherever they happen to be. You can imagine, all the Easter eggs are just everywhere. It's nice when you get them all back in a basket. That's what you concentrate on. Mono Lake, Great Salt Lake, our DWP actually works with a nonprofit and senses that with a fixed wing aircraft as well as boats.
Oh, wow. Wow. On the same topic of Owens Lake as it was, that very first picture that you showed, Diane asked, how deep do you think the Owens Lake was in that Forbes photo? And what was the approximate size, maybe the width and length or the diameter of Owens Lake?
I could go, well, I'll leave it like this. The deepest part of the lake was down towards the southern end, towards Cartago and Olancha. And it was about maybe 50 or 60 feet deep. It was about 110 square miles of water.
I bet that changed a lot seasonally too.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. In 1969, there was a huge, enormous wet year in the Eastern Sierra, 4 feet of snow in Bishop. The runoff then, a lot of that had to go to Owens Lake. DWP had to turn everything loose. The aqueduct was beginning to overflow. They had everything open they could open. And the lake got quite large and spread out more. We find old railroad ties way the hell up in the desert, a half mile from the current shore or water. And that was 69 probably. Yeah. Now, when it was 300 feet deep, it went all the way up 10 or 15 miles north of Independence. There's lake beds up there. If you come to Lone Pine and you go out to where the old train station, the river is down in this excised floodplain. It's cut through old lake beds filled with fossils and all kinds of clues to the past. And those kinds of layers have been found well north of Independence.
Wow, that's incredible. Staying on topic of Owens Lake, do you know what the mechanism is, or sorry, what the mechanism was for dictating whether Owens Lake is either a fresh body of water or a saline?
I don't know, stick an instrument in it or something. I don't know how many total dissolved solids. When it's a terminal lake, where a river comes and ends, those are always saline lakes. They're all over the world. They're everywhere. They're in Russia. They're in South America. They're in everywhere, the Middle East, Iran. Um, the way we can tell it was fresh is that in layers we find mollusks and snails, fish bones. And these are organisms that we know don't live in saline bodies of water. And so we know because the sediments below Owens Lake, down at the south end, the sediment layers go down 8 or 10,000 feet before you hit solid rock like the batholith of the Sierra. At the north end, they're shallower. They're only 6 or 7,000 feet deep. That's about what it is up in Lone Pine too. And in those layers, those are the layers of the book of Owens Lake. So far, the drilling down and really studying it scientifically, chemically, isotopes, everything, fossils, has been down to 1,000-foot level. There was a bore back in '92 that went down. All kinds of sciences come out of that. We found the mammoth, the ash from the Long Valley eruption at 1,000 feet down under Owens Lake. So all of that sediment since 770,000 years. So we can tell what animals were living there. We can tell the temperature of the water from chemically and through isotopes. We can tell its pH. We can tell where the water came from with isotopes of, I think, tritium or something, because the water is carried onto land from the ocean by these clouds, and that water came from the ocean, and so we can find out what the temperature of the ocean was at that period of time. So,
wow, that's
kind of wanted there.
Science. Yeah,
it's incredible
wow.
science. Yeah.
All right, we'll shift just a little bit,
Okay.
and as a reminder, everyone, you can write your questions into the chat box. We're getting down to some of our last ones, so this might be your last opportunity. Yeah, please go ahead and put your questions in there if you haven't already. All right, here's a question. Question from Martin. This is a little lighter of a question, but do you have a life list? And if so, what's your number?
Well, I write down birds wherever I've been, but for the last 25 years, I haven't put them all together, which I kind of hope to do while I'm still standing. But I don't know. I estimate maybe around a couple thousand. There's roughly 10,000 species of birds total on the planet. That's everywhere. 10,000. That's not a very big number. From ostriches to penguins to hummingbirds. So
yeah,
I've been a few places, chased them here and there.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. We have a question. Let's see. We'll go to a question from Elaine. Do migrating birds rely on Diaz Lake and the other lakes, maybe excluding Mono Lake, but other lakes and ponds and streams in the Owens River for food and nesting?
Yeah, I don't know that they depend on it. Like if it went away, something bad would happen to them, but they definitely use it. Diaz Lake is a very nice place to bird at certain times of year. Not so good at water skiing season in the middle of summer and boats and stuff. But I would say from Labor Day through Memorial Day, there's open water there. There's riparian. There's tules like marsh. There's an irrigated pasture at the north end. It has a lot to offer. We've seen a lot of birds there, like Martin showed us.
Yeah.
So birds use all of it. I've canoed on the part of the Owens River amongst the tules, and I've had sandpipers fly, a little flock of them flying by me right up the channel. 5 or 10 birds. They used to like meadows. A lot of those birds will feed in wet meadows. Before people were here. Now, if there's an irrigated pasture that a rancher might use, they'll use that. So that's why it's important to partner, like we're doing in Long Valley, where conservation is working with ranchers, working landscape. because we have these common interests and these common threats.
Yeah, the birds, there aren't rules on what they what they're allowed to stop at. They'll stop at where they need to stop, right? I mean,
They're opportunists. They're like people
sure,
driving by
sure.
a pizza place or a burger place, and their nose kind of goes up in the air and they're pulling into the parking lot in the blink of an eye. So,
Sure, sure.
sure.
That's great. All right, we have I'll say we have three really great questions left, so we'll cover those. We've got about 15 minutes left. I
We'll
think we're
try.
going to be right on time here.
Perfect.
First question is, what Owens Lake bird species, or what bird that relies on Owens Lake might be in jeopardy of being threatened or threatened or facing extinction?
Well, snowy plovers are one of the most sensitive. Um, they There are more at Great Salt Lake in Utah, but in California, Owens Lake is the place. And if there's only 12 or 14,000 totally in existence, possibly here in the West where they live, um, then uh, then there's real concern. Even we have to look at trends. It's kind of like measuring COVID. How are cases increasing or decreasing or flat? And the same with deaths each day. Are they increasing or decreasing or flat? We have to look at these numbers and then look at causes for those numbers possibly changing, which is very difficult because the numbers we see at Owens Lake, we can't assume, honestly, can tell us exactly what the population is doing because there are so many things that can happen to these birds when they're away from Owens Lake. What happens in South America, Central America, at the coast? Um, the snowy plover inland, which is where we are, is listed as a species of special concern by California. But the snowy plovers on the coast, on the beaches, are listed as threatened. Um, the populations don't mix; it's a distinct population. And there they have dogs and they have cats and they have humans on these little narrow strips we call beaches. You can see the challenge. And that's an area where snowy plovers are really in trouble. We're worried about long-billed curlews. Um, we're we have a lot of avocets here that'll nest and migrate through. Um, we want to make sure those populations remain stable. But many of the populations of shorebirds in general, where, like I said earlier, where there are hundreds of thousands or millions, some of those they've been trending lower for some time, and we need to find out why and what can we do.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that answer. All right, two last questions. One is, does the return of birds to the now quote watered Owens Lake also mean that predators have returned? And if so, are they a problem?
The only predator and predators would be things like raccoons near the river. They'll go out on the lake sometimes. Coyotes. But the one that is actually trying to be studied and managed managed. I don't know if that's the correct word. Are ravens. Just like ravens are impacting California tortoise down in the desert, they have this certain age class of young tortoises, 3 inches, 4 inches long, that they just hammer. You can find nests and there's 80 dead baby tortoises underneath it. We're worried about them possibly impacting the eggs and the young birds of snowy plovers because that's our smallest number. That's our species with the smallest and precious number. And so there's information all over the lake, and all the contractors by DWP are trained in the natural history of the snowy plover, how to report them. We count ravens throughout the year, where and how many, and also not leaving food, no garbage or dumpsters without good lids on them. those kinds of things. But we do have a landfill in Lone Pine, which is minutes from Owens Lake. We have dumpsters behind the McDonald's and other places where often you can find a good number of ravens. That they need to keep that closed, but that's another story. So that's probably the predator. I would say a coyote is going to go out there and get some birds. The raptors, like the harrier and the peregrine, they're going to get a few birds, but that's more in the natural way of things. No real significance.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. All right, and our final question tonight. All right, the question is, why are the shorebirds the number of shorebirds higher in the spring than in the fall, and the number of waterfowl higher in the fall than in the spring?
That's a good question. Well, one thing is the water goes out on Owens Lake to fix dust, to control dust. The dust season starts in fall, goes through the winter and into spring, maybe June. So in spring, the lake has water all over it. And so a lot of birds will come, they'll spend a few days here putting the fat on. In the fall, because the Dust Project is allowed to do a natural drying a little bit of the lake, they can begin to turn off alternate lines of water, although things like snowy plover broods are monitored for and water is always left there for them. And some water never goes away, it's there all the time. But it's significantly less water in, say, July and August, because for this migration, not for waterfowl like ducks and geese, but for shorebirds and things, the fall migration is July and August, early September. Waterfowl comes in big numbers after the waters come back on again, and there's a big buildup of waterfowl in October, late September, October, November. Thins out a little bit in the dead of winter and then back in the spring. So there's more water out on the surface of the lake in the spring, more habitat, and there's less in the fall. So the numbers, that is one factor about. And also that some birds will migrate up one flyway north, and then going south they'll take another flyway. So maybe they'll go up the coast, California coast, in the spring, and then in the fall come back inland, or vice versa. So that happens as well.
Yeah, so lots of factors could dictate. Yeah,
lots to think about.
Yeah, well, great. Well, that's it. That's all the questions. I learned so much tonight. Thanks so much, Mike.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. Anytime I can share Mono Lake or Owens Lake with people, I'm there. So count on me.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to having more Owens Lake Bird Festivals, and Mike, I'm sure you'll be there. And on that note, we want to have the Owens Lake Bird Festival as we've come to know it in person again in the future, and I'm sure we're going to make that happen. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is our third and final presentation. I hope that you enjoyed all of them. I want to give a big thank you to all of our presenters. That's Colette Gall, Jeff Norden, Martin Powell, and Mike Prather. Thank you all. We couldn't do it without our partners and our presenters. From all of us at Friends of the Inyo, thank you so much to everyone who attended. Like I said, just by attending, you are supporting Friends of the Inyo and our work to protect and care for the Eastern Sierra. And this work means a lot to us, and I hope that it's important to you too. So thank you very much. And with that, this concludes the 2021 Owens Lake Bird Festival. From all of us at Friends of the Inyo, thank you for joining us this year, and we hope to see you very soon. Thank you.